Hi, so I'm Sydney, and this is my best friend Lainey. The topic that I'm going to mainly focus on today is the general misogyny in our society. I had a tough time connecting my topic to the readings that we had just because the demographic of where I grew up is predominantly white, but I have some connections. So the first question I'm going to ask Lainey is... Ooh, what was the first question? The first question I'm going to ask Lainey is to talk about an experience, like one specific experience, where you felt undermined because of your gender.
I think that a lot of stories come to mind when thinking about this, because obviously, as two young women in today's society, like, this is a common reoccurring theme of being undermined by men or boys or whatever it is. But I think one of the main things that comes to mind as a story is I was out to lunch with some of my family and some like distant family friends, and I didn't know everyone there. I only know like the inner parts of my family. But this one, he was older. I would say he was in his like 20s, maybe like high 20s. Was just repeatedly like coming up to me, like talking to me about like school and just everything, like kind of a normal conversation, but like I was uncomfortable by the way I felt like it was going, just because I feel like he was trying to like ask me to, like hang out with him and do this and like all this stuff, and like I didn't even know who this man boy was. So I don't know, I felt pretty uncomfortable by that. But also there's the part where you feel scared to like say no, and you feel scared to kind of reject them, I guess, because you never know how that reaction is going to be. And like it should be easy to be like, no, sorry, I'm not interested, or like, oh, I have a boyfriend, like something like that. But it's kind of scary to do that because you never know, again, like how they're going to react. And you should just be able to like speak your mind like that if you're not interested.
Yeah, so that brings me to one of the first connections that I wanted to make. Okay, so in a recent, one of the more recent readings that we had was the book called Non-Binary Memoirs of Gender and Identity, and then also Black Girls Rock, Owning Our Magic, Rocking Our Truth. So those two books kind of resonated with me a little bit more, just because it felt really empowering to listen to these women be so open about how we should take our gender and not let it hold us back from other experiences, or like we shouldn't feel scared to say no or to reject somebody or to just tell somebody that we're not interested, because as a guy you could easily, like with a girl, you could obviously say like, I'm not interested, walk away, and you're not going to be scared that there's going to be like a physical reaction. I mean, with your story, that was the first thing that came to my mind, would be I wouldn't want to deal with a physical reaction or like to deal with confrontation, in person right then and there. And it's really intimidating. But those two books, I think, really told you that, like, it helped you understand that you had this power that like you shouldn't be scared to use. Like everybody has a voice and things like that, but as women, like we always feel like we need to speak up louder or speak up more firmly, I guess is a way to put it. And usually when we do that as women, if we're being a little bitchy, everybody just
we're called a bitch.
we're called names, and we're called crazy and all these things, when we're literally having the exact same reaction as a man would. But a man does that, and it's like, oh, you are, this big tough guy, and oh, you shut her down so quickly, and like you're praised for acting like that. The same thing kind of goes for being in like a workplace. Like in the workplace, women really have to, keep a lid on our tempers and stuff like that, especially in a more male predominant field. And it's frustrating as young women. Like we're both sophomores in college, and we are going into the workplace very soon, and we don't want to have to feel like we need to hold our voices back just because we're going to get looked at as crazy. And it's very uncomfortable for everyone around, and it makes you feel very inferior. So that brings me to my next question. Is there a specific time, or not as specific of a story if you can't really think of one, but have you ever felt that your gender has already put you at like a lower standpoint. You know what I mean? Have you felt like ever walking into like a classroom or a work setting where you felt, you know, you're already starting below the ball because you're a female?
I mean, yeah, I think a lot has to do with what you were already saying about how, like, you know, men can act a certain way and, like, no one really says a word about it because, you know, it's fine, it's normal, that's how they're allowed to act. And then as women, if we act the same way or if we raise our voice or anything like that, you know, like, we're called crazy, like, we're called a bunch of different things. And I feel like I am, like, being taken back to high school when I think about this, because I feel like so many boys in high school would do stuff and they would be praised for it, you know, like, or no one would, either they would be praised for it or no one would say anything. And then I know that if I were to do something or do the same thing as them, I would not get praised for it. No one would be silent about it. Like, people would talk and people would say things, and, like, obviously negative things. And, you know, that's definitely a big thing that comes to my mind when thinking about that, because there's definitely a disconnect between how men are looked at for doing certain things versus...
It's just such a double standard.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. Like, I think when I think about double standards, like, again, back in high school, we went to the same high school. I had an old friend who... He went around to this one party, and him and this other guy had a competition to see how many girls they could kiss one night. And I think one of them left the party with like the number was 17. And they were absolutely like, oh, you're the man, like, you're sick. Like, that was so sick. I can't even imagine if one of us were to do that.
Oh my God.
Because
hellfire.
We would absolutely be torn apart by the exact same guys that were praising these other boys for doing the same actions. And I think that more connects to one of the earlier books that we read, The Bridge Called My Back, writings by radical women of color. So, like, even just by that title, that word radical is, you know, very synonymous with crazy or, like, out of line. And I feel like especially nowadays with everything that's been going on in the news the past couple of years, when a woman is to speak out about important issues or just, you know, about bad behavior towards a guy in general, they get labeled crazy. And I don't think that should be, you know, the standard. Like, we shouldn't feel radical, or we shouldn't feel like we're, you know, overstepping boundaries just for speaking our mind the same way that a guy would. And they get, you know, I guess we keep saying the same word, but they get really praised for acting that way. Whereas as women, we get shut down and made to feel like we have to be like these little angels. Quiet little, like, you know, can't really speak. It's not even out of line, but out of line in a way. And I think the last connection that I'll make is the first book that we read, which was the graphic novel called She the People. And I really liked that book just from the jump. Like, it was a great way to start the class just because it helped me, you know, get a really good understanding of what this class was going to be about. And at the end of the day, I mean, I'm going to keep saying it, but we shouldn't be made to feel like we don't have this voice that we very clearly do have. But we also shouldn't be made to feel crazy for having said voice, if that makes sense. I don't know how you feel about that, but I feel like a lot of our, you know, close-knit girlfriends kind of feel the same way. Like, we have another best friend, Gabby, who I think she is the most outspoken person I know, and will never back down from confrontation. And people always think she's crazy. That's always the number one word. Like, when we're out, you know, when we used to be out before the pandemic and all those things, like, something would happen. Like, we were at a party before the pandemic and all that stuff, and this guy was being really loud and disrespectful and in our face, and, you know, Gabby had no issue, you know, getting up in there and being like, don't talk to her that way, like, don't look at her that way. And they literally looked like they made her feel like crazy. They started laughing at her. They were like, oh, who's this bitch coming in and making this big scene? But, like, they were being disrespectful. They needed to be told they were being disrespectful, but it was kind of just like the common theme for guys to treat other girls this way, and that seems to be reoccurring. I don't think it should happen. I don't think things are going to change overnight either, but I think that this class was really beneficial to help me understand that I shouldn't be made to feel this way, regardless of what my town is, what my high school is, what college is. And we go to different schools. And I know, we've all been mostly online, so it hasn't been as confrontational, but like, I don't know, I'm a STEM major. So for me personally, like, it's more of a male dominated major. And sometimes in group projects, like, we get really made out to be like these inferior people when we're not. And we have just as much to bring to the table. And I think as time goes on and as the times are changing a little bit with the next generation, that's going to hopefully, start getting into the government and start getting into, more teaching positions and things like that. Hopefully over time things will change. Like I know she doesn't want kids, but by the time I have kids and my crazy aunt over here for my kids can, encourage them to use their voice always and to not be made to feel any less than someone else regardless of their gender. So yeah, thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys. See you later.